Hello there, this is Jay Frost, and welcome to How to Raise. It's part, of course, of the Philanthropy Mastermind series, where we're going to dive deep into the strategies and mindsets that are powering today's most effective fundraising from the bottom to the top, side to side. And of course, we're talking about that today on boards. But before we get into that, I just want to welcome you here to join us in this conversation, which I think you'll find very important and useful for you at your organizations, and also want to welcome you to the conversation. So rather than looking at a lot of slides today, we're going to be talking with one another. I'll be talking with my guest, Hardy Smith, but also hopefully with you. So I know that people will be coming to the room as we're beginning today, but in order to participate fully, I hope that you'll take full advantage of our chat and our Q&A. So do use either of those. And in fact, it would be very helpful, I know, to our guest to know that you are here. So if you would, just go ahead and say hello to Hardy Smith over in the chat. If you would, just maybe which part of the country you're from, or which part of the world, which organization you're with. If you want to include your title or the kind of range of work that you do, all of that would be very important. And I want to thank Marta for already starting that process up and saying hello from Chicago. We welcome you, Marta. Thanks very much for getting us started in the chat. And of course, Jack, our producer, is right there. So he'll be able to answer any questions you have, as well as provide links potentially for anything that comes up. You can also use the chat throughout today so you can have conversations with one another, and you can use Q&A as well. So if you have a question and you want it anonymized, that's fine. We'll make sure to get that question answered by using the Q&A. So once again, use the chat and the Q&A throughout. Virginia, thank you for joining Marta there and saying hello from San Diego. I hope all is well out there. And we have Ani, who is coming in from, let me see, from Minneapolis. Good to see you. So again, welcome to all who are with us live. And for those viewing this recording later, we're happy that you decided to take a little bit of time to have a discussion with our friend and a friend of the sector, Hardy Smith, who's a nationally recognized consultant, a speaker, and author who helps nonprofits and associations build high-performing boards, which is something we all need. He draws today from his CFRE approved course, Stop the Nonprofit Board Blame Game. It's on my shelf. I should have it displayed right now, but I don't. My apologies for that. But it's a book you can get. And Hardy is going to walk us through some of the practical, actionable steps that you'd find there or in his work and his training, from getting real fundraising commitment from board members, starting with recruiting the right people, creating positive board experiences, avoiding common mistakes that drive disengagement or that blame game. By the end of today, I think you'll be equipped with some tools to build stronger, more productive relationships with those people who are so important to us and transform those fundraising expectations into real results. So let's get started. Hardy, thank you very much for hanging out today and talking.
Jay, thank you so very much. I really appreciate this opportunity. And thank you, of course, to DonorSearch for making all of this possible. Certainly great to have great support like that involved, and they mean a lot to this community. And also, congratulations, Jay, and to everyone on your team for the recognition you've been getting lately about being one of the best, most watched, highest ranked, most awesomest podcast in the world of philanthropy. So the world sees and hears the impact that you're having. So congratulations to that.
That's very kind of you, Hardy, and we're grateful to have guests like you because, of course, these shows are all built around people who are the thought leaders in the sector, like yourself. And so we've been lucky to have those conversations and then to share them with others. And thank you for acknowledging DonorSearch. I completely forgot to do that as we began. And by the way, folks, if you're here to hear about DonorSearch, you may not hear a lot about them, but do stick around. You'll be really glad you did. But if you want to learn more about DonorSearch or get a copy of this, you can do that later by going to donorsearch.net. We're filing all of our content under the resources tab there. There's also going to be an email coming to you later with a link to a recording of this conversation, so you can share it with people like your colleagues or maybe even your board members. But I don't know if you would advise that or not, Hardy. I guess we'll find out in a second.
Well, yeah, and when we talk about the blame game, and I'll get into that, but there are two sides to all of this, and it's quite interesting. And I'll tell you, there is a whole lot packed into the title, getting commitment from board members to fundraise. Oh my goodness gracious. Um, and so maybe I can be a little challenging today and just see if I can stimulate a little, oh, I don't agree with that, or hallelujah, Hardy, you're really setting it, preach it some more. But we'd certainly invite everyone to offer a comment in the chat or share a question. So if we can get into that, we're certainly glad to take advantage of that. But a whole heck of a lot in that title, getting commitment from board members to fundraise. And that, if you peel back the curtain to this, that is the secret, getting commitment. And I'm just gonna, let's just start the drama and the controversy now. I'm gonna challenge all of my friends, all of my friends in the nonprofit sector. That's something we just don't do a very good job with. And I'm gonna and let me just go ahead and you know there's a reason for that. And why do you think that reason is? Why if anyone has a reason they can share in the chat that we'll accept as a legitimate. But why do you think the sector, way too many folks in the sector do not get that commitment? About fundraising.
And here you're talking about, I mean, any kind of commitment, I guess, right? I
Any
mean,
kind of commitment, any kind of commitment. And typically, what happens, in my experience, is that we don't mention and I'm going to walk through this process of how to avoid this mistake. But typically, there are way too many, Jay, situations when the whole conversation around fundraising, a board member being a fundraiser, doesn't happen until after you've got them to the altar, they've said I do, and then at the first board meeting, oh, by the way. And it did how do you think that usually works out? It doesn't, right? So let's put some structure and flow into all this. There are three main challenges that I hear about the most. um, Number one, with our friends in the nonprofit sector. Excuse me, I'm being prompted to do a save there. So okay, did it. Three challenges I hear about the most, Jay, from our friends. Um, Number one is board members um, not doing what they're supposed to do. Number two, everyone knows this one, nonprofits just don't have enough money. And
mm.
then number three is a combination of the first two, board members who don't do any fundraising to help raise the needed funds. Well, here's the first, maybe a contrarian point of view. Uh, Folks, it's not about more board training for your board. Now, I've got a world of great colleagues. We're close friends, we're besties, and they'll come in and they'll train your board on fundraising. I got it. That's good. I'm just saying, I'm just saying that if you have an expectation that your board members are going to do fundraising and they're not, or they were and they no longer are, then you have the wrong people. So more training is not going to help. So again, I'm probably going to get in trouble with all of my colleagues who do fundraising training, but here's what I'm talking about. Action number one from the Stop the Nonprofit Board Blame Game online course, which is CFRE approved, and I'm an approved provider for CFRE, is to be intentional about recruiting. In other words, what we're trying to do here is solve the problem before it exists. Okay. So have the conversation internally. What is the expectation around fundraising that your organization has. So there's a staff conversation, and then there's a conversation with the existing board members. So I'm going to go back and forth between existing board members and prospective new board members, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So with the current board members, and current staff, what's the expectation, Jay? What is it?
Wow.
And of course they're different. Uh, they're at different aspects of fundraising, right? So there's, okay, we want our board members to be involved with selling tickets or buying tables for the annual gala or the golf tournament, um, or just providing a recommendation, a contact from your contact list, and someone you're willing to do an introduction for. Could be that simple. Or it could be a CapEx, a capital campaign. You're raising serious dollars. I've got a good friend in the world of philanthropy who works for a major university. They've just finished a $1 billion fundraising campaign. They put a ribbon on that, and now, Jay, they're getting ready to start on the next project, and that'll be $2 billion. So they've got to definitely be intentional about their board members, and because they do expect them to be involved in the campaign. So what's the expectation? And consider the different aspects of fundraising. And doesn't it make sense that, Jay, that each different level or each different aspect of fundraising activity is going to require different experience, different skills, and also a different willingness for making that commitment that we're trying to get to, getting board members committed to raise money. So it's one thing to ask me to, either write a personal check for $10,000 or raise $10,000. It's another thing for me to buy $100 ticket for a fundraising raffle. It's totally different, right? And I think it's important that we have these internal conversations, because you've got to get. I'm a sports guy, so I love especially basketball. I've coached basketball, and all the great advice that I've been given by Hall of Fame coaches is hardly the number one thing is make sure you got the talent, right talent, and you've got to have the right people in the right places. So the same thing in the world of board members and fundraising. One board member who, again, is going to give you recommendations from their contact list and willing to send an email, introductory email, totally different from someone you're asking to raise some pretty serious dollars. Is this making sense so far?
It does. And in fact, I wanted to ask you if you could talk a little bit more about not just the expectations in a general way, but the traits, because you were just saying that right now. It's getting the right people. I guess the Jim Collins way of thinking about is the right seats on the bus, or with the team. I know you can't have a guard playing forward or whatever. That's the wrong
Totally.
analogy, but so when it comes to this, part of it is having, I guess, a definition of what you want people to do before they are recruited. Although maybe later we can get to what happens if you don't have that luxury. But anyway, but let's start with there. So before we've recruited them, we have some kind of definition. But then it sounds like they don't all have to have the same definition. So it's not one job description for every person. Is that right?
That's what I'm suggesting. Again, it sounds like you're understanding basketball, so I'll take a run at that. So again, you typically, if you're following, and I'll try not to be too sports heavy here, but if you're following basketball, today's point guard is probably, if you're looking at a top college program, probably at a minimum 6'2", 6'3", and that's kind of small.
Yeah,
They
that's my
really
height.
they really got nowadays. I mean, I've got a good friend of mine who played basketball at Kentucky for Adolph Rupp, and he was about 6'4", 6'5", and he was considered a big man. He was the center at the time, and that's, I mean, that is back in the day, and that's almost too small to even think about playing at Kentucky now. But if you're also your wing players out on the perimeters, they're 6'7" is kind of small now. So really they're like about 6'9". And then your bigs on the inside pretty much got to be 6'11" to 7 foot plus. So the same thing with board members and fundraising specifically. You've got to match up the talent that you're. So if you have the expectation, and every organization's different, totally different. I think a lot of times we kind of get sucked in. We all go to a conference, or we read somebody's book or something, or went to a program, and oh my gosh, I should be doing this or that. Well, there are over 1.5 million nonprofits of one type or another in this country, and there's about 105 million different ways of doing things. So whatever works for your organization, who do you need? What do you need? Number one. And then the who do you need? So in your being intentional about recruiting and your prospecting, who is it that meets the requirements that you're looking for? Um, and in that different experience, again, just one quick note, there's a major difference between activities that you're asking board members to be involved in, Jay, that I would label as quick transactional activities, the quick dollar, that's an event dollar, or transformational relationship building that leads to where the real money is. And of course, that also takes time. And quite often, we're not thinking about those board members because we know the world of fundraisers and the churn rate of turnover. And there's often, unfortunately, not enough time to stick around long enough to develop relationships. It's quick bucks or move on. So that's another whole topic for discussion, I think. So here's my suggestion for moving forward. In the world of donor development, fundraising, development professionals, we're really good at donor research, really good at it. That if you're good at your job, you are good at donor research. Um, oh, wait, does that sound familiar? Maybe DonorSearch. Oh, sorry. Okay. Um, so product placement. So the suggestion here is do, Jay, the same diligence for prospective board members who you want to do fundraising, the same diligence that you would for a prospective donor. And there's a whole lot of, there's a whole lot of science around that. It's amazing at how much science and data that's available. It's very easily available. And there's so many of our colleagues in the sector who are quite accomplished at doing that. And so I'm just suggesting you've got the skill set, you know how to do it. Just apply what you already know to recruiting board members.
And Hardy, when you're doing that, and maybe you're going to get into this now, but
Yes.
does that mean you're not to stretch that sports analogy too much, because I'll get out of my depth quickly, but is height analogous to financial capacity or something like that, as opposed to the people who can get in there, they don't have to be as tall, but they can get things done quickly. So, in other words, when you're thinking about the composition of people on your board, and I know that boards differ, a place in $1 billion campaign is not in the same position as a place in $1 million campaign. But that said, if having a combination of people with extraordinary financial capacity and people with more modest capacity, but different kinds of commitment and connections, if that combination itself is actually beneficial, if that's what we need to look for.
That's if you were, yes, 100%. So if you were looking at a sports analogy, they always, everyone talks about the championship teams having great chemistry. Well, it's you have to have a blended group of players. Same thing with a board, especially if you want them to be fundraisers. There has to be a blended collection of talent. And there has to be a blended collection, Jay, of willingness and commitment to a targeted financial goal. And I'm going to share some things that'll help you develop those. So focusing on the research part of your prospective fundraisers, what's their history of both giving personally and fundraising? And is their giving personal, or is their giving from their company? They have the authority to write company checks. Or if they're someone who is in a company and they don't have the check writing, a check approval process, they're of a status enough that when they submit a request for a contribution, it's honored. It's what they do. So they're at that level. And it makes a huge difference. And then so what is their history? And so the history is just like if we were donor prospecting, you look up the history and it's there. You can track all that. And AI, the use of AI tools today is going to make all of this even easier. So that's a great thing. So, and the reason I say the history is important, understanding history, Jay, is important for a couple of main reasons. Number one, if we're looking at Jay Frost and wow, he's got a good history here of giving. He's really has a caring and willing to share and wants to make an impact and he's able to bring resources. Well, that's good. Well, yeah, we ought to put him on our big recruitment list. But hang on, just give that a pause. Jay's a great guy, and he has a definite track record of producing the money. However, there's one thing about past history. What about current involvement? So how many, and I want our audience to pay attention to this, Jay. How many other fundraising obligations, current fundraising obligations, does this prospective board member have? So if Jay is on 5 other boards where fundraising is an expectation, unless Jay is independently wealthy, how many then he's got to raise these, to get these checks, he's got to go to his friends, he's got to go to his family, he's got to go to his neighbors, he's got to go to his customers, his clients, maybe the company that he works for. You know, how far does that go? And am I supposed to be excited when Jay calls me up and says, "Hey, Hardy, thank you for writing those 5 checks I've asked you to write for these 5 other organizations. And guess what? I've just joined another board and they want me to raise some more money. So I'm tapping you again."
It's very transactional.
Does this make sense?
Yes.
So now we could be very close friends and I have the means to do it and I'm glad to help. However, I'm just saying, don't assume that. So how many other obligations? And is it possible, Jay, is it possible? I want our audience to think, are you going for Jay's the easy money? He's the easy one. But how many other people, again, have got Jay on their board? And you're competing with everybody else for the same dollar. So is it possible, by working just a little bit harder on your prospective board member recruiting and research, you can identify individuals who aren't on the radar? and would be tremendous board members who were perfectly capable and willing to do fundraising. Would this make sense? And now all of a sudden, you in relationships, if you want a serious relationship with someone, and they say, well, I'm really in some serious relationships with a couple of other people, but I'll be glad to say yes to you too. Well, don't we really want to be the relationship? We it doesn't. So in this kind of it is relationship based. So how many other fundraising obligations do your prospects have? What's their capacity? And here's another one, and I'd really like to hear from our audience about this in the chat. Does your prospective board member, prospect, do they have a connection to your specific mission or cause? Now, could I ask the audience why, for any feedback, why would this make a difference? Why would it make a difference? Give you a second to respond. Think about that.
That affinity piece is huge. And Hardy, as people are answering that question, I may have another question for the audience too, but
Sure.
as they're answering that question, I'm curious to know how you establish that. So in your experience, just give us one, practical example of an organization that needed to figure out, besides maybe the giving, because giving sometimes is predicated, well, often predicated on what we've done. Like, have we asked them? Did we invite them? Did we, engage with them? But beyond their giving to us, how else would we know how much they care?
Number one, I would say this is the reason it makes a difference is this is the differentiator. Okay, Lindsay. Yes. High five, Lindsay, to you. Thank you so very much.
Yes, for those who are not reading this, it's their connection to the mission. Lindsay's saying that's crucial because this means they can convey that passion for the mission to others by personalizing their communication. Yeah.
Right. And if it's just another organization, yeah, you're getting them some money. Yeah. But maybe you could it be possible you could be elevating your involvement? Could it be leading to something else, further down the road? I'm going to suggest the answer would be yes. And so it's the differentiator. So, all the different great causes that are out there. But while you're doing your research, are you just grabbing the first warm body that says, yes, I'll be on your board, and yes, I'll raise some money for you? And it makes no difference to them. They're just trying to help you do good. However, with the proper research, and it's so easy to do now, that what's their why? Is there story? What's the story there? In every single instance I've ever seen, there is one. There's always a story. So is there something in their background that causes them to have you use the word affinity for children, or a special affinity for seniors, a special affinity for homeless, or a special affinity for saving the Mother Earth and the planet and clean air and clean water? I mean, the list of worthwhile causes goes on and on and on. But if you do a little bit of homework and you find out what really motivates me to give beyond just the gift, doesn't this make sense? That all of a sudden you've elevated this board member's involvement way beyond, and probably the possibilities could be just on into infinity. And so that's why having that connection, and you mentioned passion in the chat. The word was passion. Yes. Yes, it's not just business as usual. It's about that passion. And those are tips around being intentional about recruiting. So is there anything that anyone either might that I didn't cover about specifically about being intentional about recruiting. Jay, do you have any questions about
Well,
around
I
that?
have sure I do. And I also have one for the audience for people who are willing to answer. If they have some kind of sheet of criteria that they are using in their board recruitment. So if you can say yes or no, or you could say maybe what the criteria, maybe what some of them are. One of the organizations I've worked with, Hardy, I know in the past they had very robust, but also very complicated sheet of information to help them to do this kind of recruitment process. And it ranged all the way from financial capacity and past giving and expectations for the future, solicitation, attendance at events, all the things you've been talking about. But it was all broken down into metrics. So they could say, this is where we are. And people knew that. And then they knew what they had done in terms of performance against those. And then they were thinking about always, which is something I'm sure you mentioned, the board's role in recruiting others were the best example of what the board needed for the future. So if anybody has thoughts on whether who's in the chat, thoughts on what you might be doing currently, whether or not you have any board recruitment criteria, yes or no, but also what those might be, we'd love to hear about that.
That is a great question. And also, if you think about it, your board recruiting process, is it possible that that actually could lead to, if when you're in sales and marketing, you get it, in fundraising, you get it, the funnel, feeding the funnel.
Mm-hmm.
So the recruiting is the beginning part of filling up your funnel, so that board members are actually moving in not only fundraisers, but they're actually moving into a much more significant level of involvement and engagement. And you, again, can you move them from introductory activity to a much higher level? And I think for an organization that would track things like you're suggesting, that's exactly what that could lead to.
So Hardy, just kind of summarizing this portion, because I know you'll be talking about some other things too. If you had to, without knowing anything about an organization, say, here are the top maybe 5 things that you should be thinking about. You can decide their relative weights, but these are 5 things you should always consider when doing board recruitment. What might those be?
Oh, the five. So you're looking at me as a prospective board member?
Sure. Well, anybody we want to recruit to the board, what are maybe the 5 top things we'd be looking for?
If you and let me make sure I understand, is it the board members looking at the organization or the organization looking at the board member?
Oh, no, thank you for that. No, I'm
Because it
thinking
works
about the
both ways.
organization looking for board members. But yes,
Okay.
the other one comes later. Sure.
All right. So to summarize, thank you for helping me with the clarity there. Number one is there a connection to your specific mission?
Sure.
Number two, do they have a history of active fundraising? Number three, if number two is yes, what is the history and at what levels?
Mm-hmm.
Number number four?
Mm-hmm.
It's like a game show. What? No. So number four, does that prospective board member have any existing relationships already on your board? And the reason why that's important is friends and friends. And it's easier to apply the peer pressure of, well, come on, Jay, I'm in. I mean, how many times have you been in those fundraising conversations with board members and, okay, here's my check, Jay, where's yours, buddy? And they're buds, and just the peer pressure of all of that. And I think then the fifth thing is just consider, it's possible that a quick yes is not a good answer for either you or the board member.
Wow, that's really important. And folks, if you're here with us live and you think there's something we missed, something that's on your list but not on ours, let us know what that is. But dive into that, Hardy. So a quick yes leads to trouble. What kind of trouble, and how do we avoid that?
Well, sometimes a quick yes, it goes back to my not asking the right questions at the right time. And if it's okay, I'm gonna ask you to hold on to that question, and I'm gonna get to that shortly, but I'm gonna come back to it if that's okay.
Perfect.
Um, the second learning objective that we want to share today, again, from the online version of Stop the Nonprofit Board Blame Game, in getting your board members committed to do fundraising, is understand positive board experience matters. And let me explain why and see if there's some situations that sound familiar here. And how do you create a positive board experience? Number one, productive board meetings. Now, Hardy, we're talking about fundraising. I'm just telling you, folks, if your board meetings are, if it's on Tuesday and I'm looking at my calendar and wow, I've got a noon board meeting for this nonprofit, and nothing ever happens. Uh, they're not exciting. They're not stimulating. We're not moving the needle. At the end of the 1 hour meeting, we will have accomplished nothing. And oh, by the way, I've got 3 other meetings at noon that I could be choosing from. And so, is your board meeting a not to be missed meeting? If your board meeting, and I write about this on my website, there are articles there about having productive, positive, energetic board meetings as a resource. They're there for you for no cost. But a positive, productive board meeting, Jay, stimulates energy. And when you've got a group of people that are being energized, and maybe you're hearing reports about the fundraising campaign, and maybe the meeting incorporates a mission moment. And mission moments, if you are not utilizing, so how many, I'd like a quick poll. How many in our audience utilize mission moments to help educate and motivate your board members?
And Susanna says yes.
Yes. Okay, great, Savannah. That's fantastic. Um, and they're critical, and there are different ways of doing those. But you could have a in-person visit from a client or beneficiary at your board meeting, or you could have a field trip. And it doesn't have to be every meeting, right? It doesn't have to be every meeting. A mission moment could also be a board. Listen to this. A board, how powerful would this be? A board member who is sharing their mission moment, why the cause means so much to them, their personal testimony, if you will, so that the board members are really becoming evangelists right there for the cause. And that's among their friends, that's among their colleagues. So can you feel how powerful that would be? So as far as productive meetings go, think about how you can make your meetings create an environment so your board members are thinking this is a not to be missed meeting. I want to see my friends. We're doing great work. So a great, powerful motivator. Another part of the positive board experience is good, effective communication is essential. Now, why is that? Why is good, effective communication essential for a positive board experience? I'm going to share with you, and it's all in the book. I'm going to share with you poor communication has been shared by board members from across the country with me, Jay, as the number one reason why board members don't do what they're supposed to do. And that's good members who used to be good, but now they're turned off. And and I'm not talking about more communication is not more. A good communication, excuse me, is not more. And Savannah, this is great. She doesn't want her board members to hear something at a cocktail party that she hasn't shared with them. Absolutely. So they don't want to be surprised. They don't want, you're holding information back. Timing of information is important. But if you're not communicating effectively with your board members, if they're not, here's a sign. Number one, if they're not opening your emails, if they're not responding to those emails and you're so frustrated because you're not hearing back from your board members, I'm just going to say they probably don't consider your emails worth that important, not worth their time. And that's a shocker, Hardy. I'm not trying to insult anybody. I'm just saying you're not motivating anyone with your style of communication. Now, Jay, we can do a whole program on effective communications, and we don't have time for that today. Maybe that's a future program. But give yourself a check. Are you being effective with your communications with your board members? Because if you're not, then they're not going to do fundraising. So you're losing them from the get-go. And if you need to check in with your board chair, if you need to have one-on-ones, I don't suggest asking at the next board meeting, hey, how's my communication with you guys doing? I do not suggest that at all. This is a one-on-one conversation. How can I improve? I want to improve. Help me improve. But the point is, good, effective communication. Now let's carry that is essential. Whenever I ask an audience, Jay, in a long-term relationship, what is the most essential element to a successful long-term relationship? Now, my wife and we're working on 52 years of marriage, and so it's taken me a while to learn, but I'm getting it. I'm starting to get it. 100% of the time, the hands go up. The most essential element is communication to a good, positive relationship. And the follow-up question, Jay, is what's the most important part of communication? And that's listening. So you've got to communicate effectively, and you've got to listen to your board members. And it looked like we had a really good comment there in the chat. You want to share that, Jay?
Right. This is from Susanna again. Susanna is a great participant today. Thank you so much for this. Saying that she used to send her board a Friday 5.
Nice.
5 bullet points of things that happened, received, et cetera, that week. So I know that again, this is organization specific. What works for one board may not work for another. But what's wonderful about this is brevity. So I'm sure that, as you said before, Hardy, more isn't necessarily better. It's listening and then communicating in a way that works. But I'll bet that 5 bullets of stuff works for a lot of boards, especially when it's also consistent. Now, you didn't mention consistency, but that must be another element of this, isn't it?
Totally. It's got to be consistent. So I really like that. I love the Friday 5. That's awesome.
Right.
And they will come to expect that. And it's bullet points. Boom, boom, boom. It's not going to take a whole lot of time. It's not going to waste their time. And it's written coherently. And think about who your board members are. Probably, if you're getting top level individuals in your community, they don't want their time wasted. So that's critical. One other aspect to creating a positive board experience. We might not think about this very often, but if you want your board members to be fundraisers, you've got to have accountability. Accountability for the task and meeting the expectation. And it's not accountability that you as the nonprofit professional set. My suggestion is the board has to set those parameters for themselves. And why is that important? is because you as a professional are not the one that can enforce accountability. It's got to be their peers. And it's a whole different world when the peers are saying, Hardy, we all committed and hadn't happened yet. And it's a whole different world. So accountability has got to be a part of that. And the reason that contributes to the positive board experience is if there's an expectation, Jay, and the accountability isn't there, you're now losing the people who are producing because they're like ticked off. Well, why is Hardy not doing it? And then, oh, Jay, him either. And neither the two slackers, I mean, they're not doing it. And so, well, you know what? I'm not either. I'm done. So the positive board experience matters. Those are some quick hitters there. So, in being mindful of our time, the third learning objective that I want to make sure that we cover adequately is avoiding board member relationship mistakes as it relates to fundraising. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This gets back to the question I asked you to put in the parking lot for just a moment. I'm coming back to it. So I'm doing better at remembering, Jay. That's a good. Not getting clarity, and I want to underscore this, and acceptance, not getting clarity and acceptance on fundraising expectations. So when should this conversation happen? When should the conversation happen?
Wow. Yeah, okay. I'm going to hold my breath for a moment because I want to hear if anybody else has feelings about this. Anybody in the room,
If you've
please
got
let
a
us know.
thought,
Yes, that was my
oh my
reaction too.
goodness, Susanna, I'm just really liking you. High five. This is great.
Yeah,
And she says before the member joins the board.
right.
Absolutely.
And Hardy,
And
we may not have time to get to it, but if later there are going to be people in this room with us and people watch this later and say, but yeah, but I've got this board already. I've got these people. So that's a separate issue, but please go right ahead.
yes, if you remember, we said in the beginning, set expectations with your current board involved. So
Right.
that would take care of that.
And as
Um,
you just said, clarity and acceptance.
and acceptance. Me telling a board prospect that, do you understand by coming on our board, we're asking you to raise $5,000. Yes, I understand it. But and then stop talking. You need to you're not getting the sale.
Mm-hmm.
You need acceptance. Are you comfortable with that? Will you be able to meet that expectation? So you've got to have, if there's a challenge, yes, I understand it. You need to give them some room to say, I'm not able, for whatever the reason is, I'm not able to do that. Well, don't give them an easy yes. Don't say, okay, well, we'll work with you. Well, are you going to be happy that I raise $100 and not the $5,000? You've just created a can of worms that you're not, because you remember you had a fundraising goal. The fundraising goal was not based on 10 people raising $100. So you're right. It should happen in the recruiting process. So you're making sure you're getting the right people. And why don't we have that conversation? A little bit of a hint of this goes back to the earlier part of our visit today, Jay. We don't have the conversation because we're so stressed about filling a board seat. That individual might say no. And that's why. They might say no. And then I still got a seat to fill. Well, we'll deal with that after they get on the board. Again, it's like get them to the altar. They say, I do. And then, okay, after the honeymoon, okay, well, what I want. Here's what I expect out of this relationship. How does that work? Not good. Another quick mistake, assuming that board members are supposed to and obligated to raise money. Let me repeat that. It's a mistake to assume that board members are supposed to and are obligated to raise money. Now, I can just hear, well, but yes, they are. I'm gonna say no, they're not. The number one requirement, the only requirement of being a board member of a nonprofit board is governance and the fiduciary responsibilities. And those are determined by the organization's charters of incorporation, whatever state you're in, and rules and regulations, Congress, and the Internal Revenue Service.
Right.
If you want your board to be a fundraising board, that's fine. I don't have an issue with that. The challenge comes in when you're assuming without asking first. So if you have the conversation, they're on board, it's all good. Have at it. Another mistake, it's treating board members like they're ATMs. I'm going to tell you, money and people, that's personal. That is personal. So when you're coming to me like, well, you're asking or are you telling? And is there a please? You're just wanting to hit the ATM. It's not good, folks. And that's why board members don't do fundraising. You're turning them off. How is this, Jay? Is this being helpful?
Well, I think so. And it certainly matches my experience. And when you were talking about that second item, people not having that conversation about the expectation, I cannot tell you how many times I've talked to an organization or talked to the board and or the executive director or president, the CEO, and they've said, well, they won't give. And then there was no expectation set. And so of course they're not going to do that, because not because they're intransigent, but because there was no common understanding. It was just like you said about kind of having a wedding, but nobody read the vows before they jumped the broom. It's not good.
Not good. If there's time for a couple of quick hitters to wrap up with,
Please.
I would suggest, urge, let me just say, I'm telling you, our nonprofit friends, consider these 2 points with everything we've shared today. Good board members don't automatically make good fundraisers, and good fundraisers do not automatically make good board members. And doesn't it make sense that you really need a blend of both? So that's part of what you're looking for in that recruitment process. Second and final point to share. Not everyone is willing to ask other people for money. And if you want fundraisers, get fundraisers. So I hope this will help our friends in the nonprofit sector develop better fundraising relationships with your board members and get the people that you really need to move your mission forward. Jay,
Hardy, before you go away, this I know will be helpful, but I want to give people a minute to gather their thoughts in case they have a question or a comment about any of this, even if it's very specific to your organization, maybe a problem you have or have had or anticipate having in the future with getting your board to do what you think they should be doing, or maybe things they've demanded of you, which we haven't really covered here, but things they've demanded of you that you think perhaps are unreasonable, and ways to address it. So please go ahead, comb your mind for that for a moment while I just share what's going to be coming up in the series next. And that is that tomorrow on the PM podcast, our guest is Abby Trahan, who is one of the young, outstanding fundraising professionals honored by AFP this year. So you'll hear that conversation. It's fresh on the heels of when she just went and joined the MD Anderson Cancer Center in a senior role. So you'll find that a lot of fun, and there's a lot of content there from the podcast. Do give it a listen if you would, wherever you like to listen. And then next Thursday on How to Raise, we don't have a frontline show next week, But next Thursday on How to Raise, which is this show, June 19th at 1 p.m. Eastern, we welcome back Erica Wasdorp, who's one of the world's leading experts on monthly giving. So she's going to be talking about long-term ongoing revenue through monthly giving. So definitely mark your calendars for that. It's so important to our work. And then the following week, if you're going to look that far ahead, and I hope you will, because it's the big announcement of the year in fundraising, which is our Frontline show will return with a special edition on the new Giving USA results. They will be out that morning at noon, and we will be releasing them and talking about them at 1 p.m. So you can't get it any fresher than that. That's again on June 24th, and we'll be joined by Roger Ali, who's the chair of AFP Global, Rashida Childress, who's the senior editor of the Chronicle of Philanthropy, and our very own Sarah Tedesco, the executive VP at DonorSearch, unpacking what all those numbers mean for each and every one of us. So do join us for all of that. So let's see if there are any questions or comments here. I don't see any right now. Oh, here we go. I've asked board members, says Maria, to share one contact, an individual who they know and is connected to the organization, and make an introduction of or share contact info. And very few follow through on sharing one or two prospects. I run into this all the time. So what's your reaction to that, Hardy?
My suggestion, two. Number one is I am just not a fan, and it's just from my experience of being in a room of people and throwing out, hey, it sure would be great if every board member would share just one contact and for us to follow up with, and we'll do all the work. If every board member would just do one, that'd be great. And we'll pass a piece of paper around, and it's, it comes back blank, no hands go up, no one's got a contact, crickets. Okay, take that. I'm not trying to pass judgment here. I'm just saying, here's my experience. Take that as like touch point number one. Touch point number two is an individual reach out to each individual board member. Now, if you've got it, I understand if you've got like a big number of people, might take a little bit of time, but still individual communication, conversation. And with that, ask, hey, may I set up a call on Wednesday afternoon, or come by your office, or could we have coffee? But you're making it a personal ask, and you're soliciting that contact just like you would a check. And then they see it's important, and they're giving some time to it, and they're processing it. And I want to follow up about the request to get a contact point. And then there's that follow-up point. And then let them know they gave you the contact, you made got the referral, you made the contact, and that meeting happened. And whether it produces a result or not, let that board member know that you did follow up, how much you appreciate it, and that makes a big difference. And then recognize the behavior that you want. So in the board meeting, maybe not mentioned by name, but just a general thank you to everyone who has assisted us, our fundraising efforts, by sharing that one contact person. We've been making these one-on-one visits with potential donors, and the results, we're just excited about how just the difference one contact is making. But you're providing that recognition, and that recognition could be in that Friday 5. I like that idea. That Friday 5, just a thank you. It could be but just recognize the behavior that you want. And just, again, it takes time, it takes patience. And again, not everyone's willing to, old school would be everyone's willing to open up their Rolodex, but not everyone is. And you just have to learn who is and who isn't.
Yes, you have to help them make the mental connection so they'll know who they want to talk to about what. It's not just a blank piece of paper. Yeah,
right.
It's a problem for all of us, and that's a great practical solution for it. Thank you so much for all of this, Hardy. Really appreciate it. And I appreciate everybody who's been here with us live, as well as those who are watching this after the fact in the recorded version. Hardy, if people want to learn more about your work, and I do know we have a link, I think, here, but just so people could hear it, how can people find out more about you and the work that you do?
Very simple. My website is hardysmith.com. I'm an active participant on LinkedIn, so love to connect with everyone there, both on my website and LinkedIn. I've got a number of articles that are there, great resources, books I have read and recommend. So, and any contact points would welcome those. So hardysmith.com, and that's where you can find the Stop the Nonprofit Board Blame Game. That's where you can find more information about my CFRE online course based on the book. It's all there. Thank you.
Thank you, Hardy. And I do want to answer a question from the crowd before we roll off today. And before I do that, I just want to ask everyone to do us a favor, and really do yourself a favor, which is that you're going to see, as soon as you leave today, a little survey pops up. It's only 5 quick questions. We would love it if you'd fill that out. That's our way of listening to you, so that we will know what you want to see and hear on each of our 3 programs every week. And we really do value what you have to say. So if you just take a second to fill that out, we'd be grateful. Now, we did have a question about, would there be a session on the use of AI from Maria? And thank you for that question, Maria. We have had so many sessions on that topic that you'll find many of them in our resource directory over at DonorSearch.net. That's the home of our sponsor, where you're going to find a lot of information on lots of things, including on your donors. But under the resources tab, you'll see lots of information on that particular topic. And we are going to be holding a whole mini series on that coming up this fall. That'll be very specific to AI because of all the things happening there. I've been speaking on it at conferences, so have colleagues, and we are going to make sure that it's more of an instructional curricula. So please be on the lookout for that, and make sure that you're on our list so you hear about it as it occurs. Again, my thanks to everybody here who's joined us. Thanks, of course, to our producer, Jack, in the background, quietly making sure things don't go awry. And of course, to you, Hardy, for being here again and sharing. Really appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. Thank you.
We'll see you all next time. Till then, take care.